Thank you for having me. I'm so excited, Tracy, to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, everyone, please welcome Suzette Conway. Suzette is the founder of the Flittersphere community, and I'll put a link for that in the description down below. And Suzette is a coach. She focuses on and specializes on working with women in midlife who are looking to make a shift in their lives. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And for those of you that might be new, I'm your host, Tracy Loring. I have the Creative Musings podcast. And here we talk about different ideas and premises to help you live your life more intentionally. And so today, the topic of today with Suzette is going to be around spirit guided metrics. And Suzette and I have worked together and known each other for many years. And the first time I heard you use that term, Suzette, I was just, it just sort of hit me like, oh, that is so cool. And so much of what we do, at least in the business world, which is where I have a lot of
Mhm.
background, is about, well, how are you going to know? How are you going to measure that? And we don't often talk about that in other parts of our lives. And so I'd love for you to just tell us more about, what spirit guided metrics are, how we can use them, what impact they may have, and just anything at all you'd like to share.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I had the same. It impacted me in the same way when it first came to me like this, right? Like it. I'll share with you a little bit about how it popped up in my life, but basically, the to me, I call them spirit centered metrics, and it's this notion of measuring myself in a way that is qualitative as opposed to quantitative. So we live in a world, right, that you mentioned in the business world that's heavily quantitative. We need hard numbers, like how much money did we make, how many clients did we serve, how many likes did I get, how much weight did I lose, right? Like,
Mhm.
and these things can be useful. They're powerful in and of themselves for a lot of ways, right? They can help us see like where we are and where we want to be, and you and I know that that creates that tension that pulls us towards where we want to be. It's good to have information at a glance about, are we headed in the right direction and where are we, that kind of stuff. But personally, I find that I use that kind of measurement, that those kind of metrics, to beat myself up. I literally
Mhm.
use them to measure my self-worth, and I become obsessed with the numbers. Did I lose enough weight? Did I get enough likes? Do I have enough experience on my resume, like whatever that is, right? How many more clients must I get before I can consider myself successful? And it's not a pleasant experience, right? It's really hard to meet my own standards when nothing is ever good enough, because the whole point of quantitative measures is to keep you moving forward. Like you never hit enough, right? There
Mm.
always needs to be more. And so like all things, quantitative measures can be functional and dysfunctional, and I tend to line up with the dysfunctional side pretty heavily on that. And it's like you, I mean, because we met in the corporate space, right? So we know that's what we're trained to do. Well, about 2 years ago, I had a coach in a business program I was in, and she said this thing to me that just changed my world. And I want you to notice the language, because I'll never forget how she said it. She said, I was beating myself up in the session, right? And she said, I invite you to experiment with different ways to measure your experiences in life. Maybe ask yourself how much joy you felt, and then go from there and see what else you can come up with.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it just was like fireworks going off in my brain, right? And in my heart, really. It was like, holy smokes, I never considered that that it was okay to measure myself in those ways, much less put any thought to it, right? So I stepped back and I started thinking, here I am in my own midlife shift, trying to completely reset my life and live in a different way and experience my life differently. And I hadn't given enough thought to what success looked like in that frame compared to my other frame, right? The context had shifted, but my measurements hadn't. And
Mm.
so I started to look at that, and I came up with a list of qualitative measures, not quantitative, right? So not hard
Mhm.
numbers, but what am I experiencing? And I started with my health. And one of the first things I did was start looking at non-scale victories, right? Like, do my clothes fit better? Do I have more energy? Did I sleep better? And I quit getting on the scale. Weight in general is a poor measure of health, but for
Mm.
me, I beat myself up with it a lot. So that was my starting point. And then I started adding other measures, and I thought, what are the kind of metrics reflect the quality of life I'm living, right? And so can I share with you the list of things that I
Yeah,
do?
please do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I look at things like, do I have a sense of accomplishment? And I don't just mean like checking off something on a to-do list. I mean, do I feel like in this experience, this activity I just did, was I well used? right? Were my
Mm,
skills well used? Was my brain challenged? Was I engaged in this and I finished something on top of all that, right? So, did I have a sense of deep accomplishment? Was I curious? Did I experience awe and wonder today?
mm,
Did I laugh today? Did I honor my truth today and follow what I call keeping my own counsel, right? Is living life according to my rules and my priorities and not other people's perceived expectations, meaning I perceive their expectations, which are almost always wrong anyway. And I look at things like, did I create momentum and was I vulnerable and was I present and intentional in my day? And did I approach my day with this attitude of playfulness and let's see what happens, right? And just be willing to put myself out there. And what I noticed was that those metrics made me happier. They spoke to my spirit and my soul. And so now I think about those things all the time. And it's not so much that it's not a complete list. You can have your own metrics, right? Whatever those things are for you. And it isn't that I gave up, you know, corporate kind of hard numbers, but I don't care as much about them. They're secondary measures to me about the quality of life I'm living. And so because of that, I'm not as afraid to look at them. Like before, I
mm,
would avoid those numbers, right? Oh, don't get on the scale. It's just going to validate that I didn't lose enough weight. Don't look at the numbers for this quarter. It's just going to validate that I have more to do, that I didn't sell enough, right? And so I don't avoid it as much because it's not my primary metric, which is pretty powerful.
mm, mm. Something
Yeah.
you said just really jumped out to me about progression and movement and not looking at things, right? So, something that you just said is resonating with me about some folks I speak with feel like they're stuck, like they're
Mm,
not making progress in their life, and maybe they're just not asking the right questions.
yeah.
Because if we're looking at how much money do I have or how much do I weigh or what's my title and my corporate career versus the ladder that I'm looking to climb, we may not want to look at those things if we feel like we're not making progress, and
Mm,
therefore how do you know if you're moving if you're not looking? And
yeah.
so reevaluating what you look at as a way to gauge progression can be a really powerful thing. That's an interesting perspective. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree with you. It's like you and I know this because of the work we do, right? Is
Mhm.
that when something is hard for you, when your ego's involved in it, I don't want to look at it in this example because I think I won't have hit my numbers, right? It's powerful to look at it. It takes the power out of the thing that you are beholden to when you
Mm,
can look honestly at it and evaluate it from a different perspective. And for me, that happened a lot by using the spirit centered metrics. Looking there allowed me to not be so afraid to look at the numbers, which then pulled the power out of the numbers in terms of how I defined myself by them. Right.
mm,
So,
mm,
yeah,
mm.
it
And
was shocking.
yeah. And is this a practice, Suzette, that you look at all of these every day, or sort of how does this show up for you in your day-to-day life?
Yeah. So I'm gonna call it practice-ish.
Mhm.
So it's very light. It is I have a list of things of habits that I'm forming that I try to think about, it's next to a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday checklist kind of thing and all of these things. But I don't look at it in terms of did I check off every one of these spirit centered metrics every single day? Because that's very much in the vein of hard metrics, right? Is did
Mm,
I do enough of like talk about warping this, right? Is like, did
mm.
I do enough of my spirit centered metrics to be valuable and I turn it into a hard metric? So no, so I don't look at it like that. It's about being aware and conscious. So I have this list of metrics, and every day, every couple of days, I sit down and think about how the last few days have been going. And I kind of check it off and go, yeah, on Tuesday, I felt some joy and I created some momentum. And at the end of the week, what I do is I look at it and I think, it was a pretty damn good week, right? If there's even one check mark up there, it was a pretty damn good week. But really, what it's about is, was I present and aware? Did I even notice that I had a sense of vulnerability, that I allowed myself to play? And if there aren't a lot of check marks up there, that to me is a signal to be more present and intentional in my life in the next week, right? So
Mm,
it's less about did I check everything off? It's more about, am I paying attention truly to the experience of my life, and am I living it in a way that matters to me?
mm,
And so I use it like that. So I do look at it, but I don't hard measure it.
mm. There's something really powerful about defining your own measurement as well. right?
Mm,
Because when we're subjecting ourselves to the definition of success that we get externally, we forget about the things that really drive us and are important to us. So there's something really powerful about going, what matters to me?
yeah.
How do I want to live my life? And therefore, how am I gauging whether or not I'm doing that, on your own
Yeah.
terms, right?
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unique to you. And you bring up a good point here is that when you think about what matters to you in your life, we tend to often think of it again by other people's standards. Oh, making money matters, time with family and friends matters, giving back matters, right? So I
Hmm.
did this activity for myself that I do with some of my clients that it was so powerful in helping me set this. And I think we've talked about it before. It's like this notion of my priorities have four levels, right? So it's boulders, rocks, pebbles, and sand,
Hmm.
right? and
Hmm.
and they are important in that order. So the things that are in my boulders category are the things I want to have more of in my life, and the things that are all the way down in the sand are the things that just get in the way. It's like sand at the beach. It gets everywhere and it's grainy and it's irritating and it stops me from focusing. Well, when I did that activity, I was really shocked when I asked myself what mattered to me, and therefore, what am I going to measure my success by, if you think of it this way, right? Is family and friends and making
Hmm.
money, working for money, were not in the first tier. And that stunned the heck out of me
Hmm.
because I'm family oriented and I thought, there's something wrong with this. But what happened was that I was so in touch with my spirit in that moment when I was doing it that what rose up to the boulders, to the top level or layer, right, was the stuff that feeds my spirit. It was I have a love of input and playing with ideas and information and making connections and then putting it out in some other different format, right? So I love to learn and read and go to seminars. Like that's play for me. Like not like it wouldn't be for a lot of people, but I love seminars. And so I started paying attention to what is it that fuels my soul and that feeds me at like a foundational level. And so health was the part of that. And what happened was I learned that I could use those boulders as a filter. Right. And so when I'm making decisions, when I'm assigning my resources and prioritizing the things that I do or don't do in my life, I ask, like, did it serve my health? Right. Is it going to allow me to revel in my love of input and connectedness?
Hmm.
Right. Is it something that I'm trying to think what some of my other boulders are on that list, but this that may help me to be the best person that I can be, the best version of myself, right? And I realize those things absolutely do come first to me because everything else is dependent on me being a good Suzette, right? Honoring
Hmm.
myself. And then it was so funny to see what fell to the bottom. Like, turns out I don't want to volunteer. I don't want to be like, I think that I had really sat with, ooh, that makes me a bad person.
Hmm.
But it was
Hmm.
a lesson in what you were talking about is what kind of life do I want to live and how do I define the success of that life internally, what's true to me. And the truth is I'm never going to go serve food at a soup kitchen. I'm happy to write a check, but I'm never going to go do that, right? And
Hmm.
so honoring that was important. Wasn't pretty to look at, but it was important. And those spirit-centered metrics come out of that.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that exercise of the boulders, the rocks, I love that exercise. I use that with my clients as well. And what a great way to identify, sort of ask yourself those questions. If I could only, have one, which one would it be? And what are the things that are the need to haves, the non-negotiables in my life? And then
Yeah,
reverse engineering those metrics off the back of that.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty powerful because it really we live in a world that wants to tell us what our priorities should be, right? And we do take on, most of us as human beings, we understand what other people expect of us, and we
Mm,
often tend to take that on, in my experience anyway, and let it guide us more than we let ourselves guide us. And there's a certain freedom that comes from saying, I get that that's important to you, person X or business Y, right? That's not so important to me. And I know now what my boulders are, and I'm living by the boulders. I'm not living, by other people, my boulders even, not other people's.
mhm. So I can imagine somebody going, "Okay, that sounds great, Suzette. That's wonderful. Yay for you." But I have to pay my rent.
Hmm.
I need to I've got family, I've got a partner in my life, and they're gauging success this way. What would you say to that person who might be feeling like they don't have an option other
Mhm.
than those external metrics that are put upon them versus ones that they might define for themselves?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a good question. I think the first thing I would say is that it isn't one or the other. One of the secrets to life is having an and attitude instead of having an
Mm,
or attitude. It isn't that I don't use those other kinds of metrics anymore. It's that I'm not owned by them, right? They don't own me. And
mm,
so I still look at them, and I have clients answer to. I have a business I need to make money, and otherwise it's a hobby, right? Like I still use those metrics, but they're secondary for me, and there was real power in shifting the other metrics to the top of the list. And even if they aren't always at the top of the list, like if the list kind of fluctuates a little bit, at least those other things are in the list. At least I'm valuing joy as much as I'm valuing revenue numbers, right? That
mm,
kind of
mm,
thing. And so I would say, first of all, it's not one or the other. And in that sense, you're not mixing something that's important to you or your boss or your partner. You are adding in the things that are also important to you. And it's super important for you to give that to yourself, right? If you live your life only in accordance with what is important to other people, you will be living their life, not your
mm,
own. And that
mm,
is a recipe for unhappiness. And I know,
mm,
because that's the whole reason I needed my midlife shift, right? Is I'm a recovering pleaser. I spend my whole life in this codependent state of caring more about what other people wanted than what I wanted. And it led to a miserable place, a miserable human experience, right? And so I think you owe it to yourselves to do that. And if that's hard for you, what I would suggest is you question why that is. What do you think happens if you stand up and say, I would like more joy in my life, and that's going to be an important factor in how I measure my experiences, my success, whether I take things on or not, right? What do you think happens? And face those fears, look at them. And you and I know, Tracy, from doing this work, that most of the time, those fears are unfounded or
mm,
exaggerated. But even if they're not, we have to look at them honestly, instead of turning away from them, right?
mm,
And then in terms of, I'm trying to think. You mentioned something about like a partner, like assuming that they don't want to measure it this way, right? That's okay. That is their life. But if you're a good partner, right, wants to be respectful and honoring of what you need in your life. So if joy is important to you, and I keep going back to that one, it's such a foundational thing. But you could look at everything. If being curious is important
mm,
to you, and if it lifts you up and it kind of lights you up a little bit, and you're like, oh, I love to learn new things and ask lots of questions, and your partner isn't making space for that, I want to suggest that you got bigger issues than how you measure your life, right?
mm.
Like there's something there that needs your attention, is I guess the way to say that. And so without judging that, without saying, oh, get a new partner,
Mm,
right, or
mm,
a new job or whatever, I'm saying pay attention to it. If it makes you uncomfortable to measure by curiosity or awe or joy or momentum or whatever that is for you, I think that's important to ask why that is. And what do you think happens if you start doing that? And what do you think happens if you do start doing that? Right?
mm, mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also what happens if you don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
What is the cost to you of not
Yeah.
living true to yourself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Talk
And
about hard measurements.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's always a question that always gets me whenever I look at, well, what if I do this? What if I do this? Every once in a while I ask myself, and what's the cost, the impact if I don't? And usually that's kind of gets me in the gut like, oh yeah, what if I don't live my true nature and purpose?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
And
does that mean for me? Yeah,
and I
my
think the
family.
secret that people don't tell us until that we don't know until we do this, right, is living your true nature and purpose actually liberates other people to do the same thing, and it
Mm.
makes everybody happier. And it can be bumpy. It's not when you change the nature of a dynamic between people, whether it's you and your partner or your boss or your siblings or whatever, there's going to be some bumps in the road because people are comfortable in the way they function, right?
Mm.
But if you can make it through those bumps, if you can have honest conversations, if you can explain your whys, this is why it matters to me to seek out opportunities where I can have a playful attitude, right? Maybe you have someone in your life who's really serious and they don't value that. if you can help them understand why you value that and tell them what you need from them, and that you can use those kinds of techniques to shift the dynamic between the two of you. And even if you're not changing them, which isn't the goal here, you're changing yourself and allowing yourself to express things differently and feel things differently. And that's all that matters. It doesn't mean you need to change them. Right.
Mm,
And so, yeah.
yeah. Underneath all of that, I love this idea of asking yourself why that is. What would happen if you allowed yourself to define these sorts of things for yourself? And there's a word that someone I've been working with recently has used lately that just I love the nuance of it, and it's having agency in your own life.
Mm,
Often we talk about ownership, but there's something about that word agency
yeah.
that I find really intriguing for some reason. And it's this idea that, you have a role to play in your own life in defining yourself and defining what you want and where you want to go and how you want to get there. And often we don't allow ourselves that sense of agency.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
asking these spirit centered metrics could be a great way to step into that space.
Yeah, it's, I'm with you. I love that word agency. And then to me, I kind of liken it to autonomy also, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want to, autonomy is like, I want to be in control of myself, but agency is I'm choosing to do what it takes to make that happen, right? It's
Yeah.
that I take ownership of the life
Yeah.
I'm creating. And I know one of the things when I work with my clients, I always say I'm taking a stand for the fact that you have a right to your best life and you have the responsibility to create it if it isn't what you have right now. Like no
Mm.
one else is going to do it for you, right? And so it's sort of like I used to run around town giving presentations on social media for building a brand in my old corporate days, right? And I had this line where I said, "Your a brand is going to evolve, and you have a choice about how intentional you are with it. Either you're going to brand yourself, or Google's going to do it for you, right? Like what evolves, what comes up, how you frame things in your experiences, so other people can so you help other people interpret who you are, right? So it's the same thing here. You are going to have a life experience, and you're either going to create it intentionally or you're just going to let it happen to you. And
Mm.
and those experiences are going to be very different. And I think a lot of us spend a good chunk of our lives letting things happen to us. And I know for me, I even learned to value that. I would say, oh, I love going with the flow and just taking what happens. And there's some truth to that still, is just being in the flow of things in the sense of not taking things too seriously, right? But I have, to your point, agency. It is up to me to build the life I want for myself in all of the different facets in my life, right? This is my human experience to have. So what am I going to do about it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I heard you mention a couple of times this work.
Mm.
And folks who are familiar with my podcast may have a sense of what that is. But if they've never been here before, can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by this work?
Oh gosh, it's so funny. This is something I always struggle with because in my heart it makes total sense and verbalizing it is sometimes harder. So I'll share what I think it is, but I would love to know what you think it is because you're so much more articulate than I am about this stuff. So to me, it is this practice, this set of techniques, this desire to it's an experiment, if you will, around how do I live my best life? And it starts with self awareness. It's this doing the work intentionally, understand who you are. What are your thoughts and your feelings, your beliefs, your assumptions, your expectations about yourself and other people? How do those things affect the way you behave, your actions, right? Which affects your experiences. What triggers you, right? That kind of stuff. And why does it trigger you? And where does that come from? And is that really what you want for yourself? Like it's this questioning journey of understanding yourself so that you can be more intentional with how you experience the world. Because we are, I believe, always doing our best, right? In whatever moment we can. But we're all functioning with egos that are trying to keep us small because that feels safe, right? So
Mm,
the part of our brain that tells us we are not good enough, we're imperfect, we're not smart enough, we're not capable, we can't trust other people. These beliefs are ego driven and they put us down a path that keeps us safe and small and um, not fully expressed in the world, right? And then there's this other path that is spirit focused, right? That says, yeah, yeah, I see all that, but I have this yearning in me I want to do more and be more. And I want to be whatever that looks like. It's really about fully expressing your spirit in the world. the
Mm,
truth of who you are and where you came from and what you're meant to do here and all of this stuff. And we spend a lot of time in our human experiences suppressing that part of ourselves because it's, well, for lots of reasons. But the work that I'm talking about is understanding those two orientations and learning how to shift from one to the other intentionally without making it mean a lot. So understand yourself, understand how you're focusing, and know that there's power in shifting intentionally, and there are specific tools that can help you do that, and that is this work. And the more I can shift myself into a spirit face focusing, orientation, a spirit facing orientation, the more I create a life that's in line with my heart and the truth of what I want
mm,
for myself. And the
mm.
more I do this work, the less I make it mean when I am not in that space, right? When I'm in my ego space and I'm making fear based decisions all day long and it's been a crappy day and I'm judging everyone and myself, and, I can look at that now and think, oh, yeah, I'm in my ego. Instead of hating myself for that, I just kind of laugh and go, well, let's pull out that toolbox. How am I shifting myself out of that space? So that's the work.
Mm. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that differentiates it a lot for me versus other methods and ways of living is what you said about intentionality. Really getting clear about what it is that you want to go after in your life and
Mhm.
taking ownership over that and putting resources and tools in place to get there.
Yeah.
That yeah, that to me is the biggest differentiator versus just thinking positively about what I would love and
Yeah.
hoping the universe sends me what I need and all of that stuff, and that's fine for folks that want to live their life that way, but there's another component of that that's also, yeah, that's what I would love, and that's what I'm going to create, that's what I'm
It's
going
the
to do.
agency that you're talking about.
Yes.
Agency is
Yeah.
ownership. It's I own the fact that it's up to me to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you know from doing this work that you didn't know? Like if you look back in your life, I don't know, 5, 7 years ago, and however you were living your life then
Mm.
versus how you live your life now, what is that like? What is that like to you? What have you created with that agency, that intentionality? What do you know now that you didn't know then that changes how you live your life?
Great question. The thing that jumps out to me right away is the purposefulness of it, that
Mm.
it can be so intentional. I've always considered myself having lived a charmed life, right? Things just sort of
Me
came
too.
to me, didn't have to
Yeah.
work really hard for stuff. And I've always thought myself, that wow, I've did a good job in a past life. I was reaping the rewards karmically of having done a lot in past lives. But yeah, I think, starting now and looking back yeah, probably it's been 7-ish years since I started living my life this way. That's the main difference is things still come to me, but they're precisely the things that I've asked for. And I've gone after things in my life in these last 7-ish years that I don't know that I would have considered myself possible. I don't know that I would have thought it would have been possible to have. So I don't know if I would have allowed myself to want some of those things.
Mm.
And living this way, I allow myself to want them and therefore intend to create them and therefore have them because I end up creating them. So I think it's the awareness for me personally of, yeah, I can actually do this and it works, and holy cow, I can really intentionally create the life I want versus feeling lucky for being given the life I have.
Mm. Yeah. The agency again underlying it all. It is you. We are
Yeah.
the predominant creative forces of our life if we choose to be, right? And so
Hmm.
yeah, there's you touch on something that just really is big for me, allowing yourself to have those dreams, allowing
Mm,
yourself to really to let in what it is you want and to give it a name, right? To see
mm,
it. I know when we first started in this journey years and years ago, it was really hard for me. My dreams were really tiny. They were very safe dreams. And it wasn't even like I had a big dream sitting over here that I refused to look at. I didn't know how to dream past like this big, right? Like a big dream was like, "Oh, could I have a vacation this year?" Right? As
Mhm.
opposed to, could I go to Tahiti? Like
Mhm.
that, what would Tahiti look like? And by the way, could I stay there for 3 weeks? And what if I wanted to work remotely and I could work from anywhere? And then I could go to Ireland. Like those things didn't occur to me. It was very tiny. And I learned that that was a skill. Like letting yourself dream big is a skill you can evolve. And as the precursor to all the skills we have around how do you create intentionally once you know what it is you want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Mm.
Tell us a little bit more about Flittersphere.
Oh, Flittersphere. I love the Flittersphere.
I love how you just like, oh, your posture changes, you
You
light
know,
up. Yeah.
I know. It's like, who is it? It makes me very happy. So the Flitter Sphere is this space that I've created. It is the concept behind it is that we all, if you think about a firefly, right? They have like a organic light in them that when they are mating, when they're connecting in community, they light up and they can't help themselves. It's organic, it's natural, and it's part of the inside of them. It's a biochemical reaction. And I love the analogy of that to us humans. I don't think we're all like this. I think there are people like us. And I think there are people who want to be like this, but we have this part of us that wants to be expressed in the world. Our gifts, our talents, the things we want to create, how we want to experience things. When we let that light shine, it is beautiful. But when we do that in community with other people doing that, it is magical. And it's the imagery that I have for that in my head is like fireflies when they all light up in this there's a breed of fireflies in North Carolina that lights up synchronistically. Like they flash in groups and in a pattern and stuff like that. And it's all they think it's about mating and things, finding a mate. But what I love about that is like when we let our light shine, we call to us other people who want their lights to shine, and
Mm,
together we get to cast a whole different luminescence of you on the world around us, right? So I, with that in mind, I was like, how am I going to change the world? How do I help people shine a light? And so I created the Flitter Sphere, and the flitter is a made up word. I was looking for this concept of like, how do you bring people together? Is it, oh, this is the creative cafe or whatever? I was playing with all manner of things. And I realized that there wasn't a word for a grouping of fireflies. Like you can have a school of fish or a herd of buffalo. There's nothing for fireflies when they all come together. And so my sisters and I made up the word flitter. And it's like, oh,
mm,
there's a flitter of us. We've all come together. And that's where the name Flittersphere came to be. And what that's morphed into is online communities and coaching. And I'm working on group programs now. And eventually, when the world is fully back open, I hope it also includes in person stuff. But it's just this space physically and emotionally where people come together to do this work, to say, I am in the middle of my life and I want to shift it somehow to level up to the next best version of me, to do it intentionally, to learn how to create what I would love, and to develop skills that I can use now and 5 years from now and 10 years from now as I constantly do that, right? As I'm going up in that Fibonacci spiral over and over again, how do I create the best life for myself? And so I created the Flitter Sphere as a space to help women do that. And so,
mm,
yeah.
mm. And you mentioned that you primarily focus on women who are making or in the midst of or want to make a midlife shift. Why women and why that point in their lives?
Because it's me, right?
Mm,
So when this is they say when we go off to do things like coaching or teaching or whatever, we are coaching and teaching what we ourselves need and couldn't find, or what we have experienced and want to share, right? And when I found myself, I woke up in my, I don't even know when this was. Let me think. It had to be 2016, so I was probably late 40s, 40. I can't do the math that fast. I think I was 48. and, and I woke up and was so miserable. And it's, can I share the story? Do you have a
Please,
moment? Can
yeah,
we?
of course, yeah.
So I had my own home, and I lived a few blocks from my younger sister, and our older sister lived about a half an hour away. And her and her husband were selling their house, and the new one they decided they were going to end up building. Well, their house sold so fast they had nowhere to live because they didn't even know what they were going to build. So her and her husband came and lived with me. And we would get in these amazing conversations late at night on the back patio about entrepreneurship and our life journey and all this stuff. And I said to her, I feel like a trapped artist, if you will. Like there's this part of
Mm.
me that is not being expressed and I can't put my finger on it. I can't describe it, but it's making me miserable. Like I have to figure this out. I said, I feel like selling my house and pressing the reset button on my life and just starting over. And she says, well, why don't you? And I had no good answer, Tracy. There was no reason for me not to do it other than
Mm.
my own desire for comfort and for the egoic markers of success. I had a home, I had a good job, I had a nice career, I had good friends. Who was I to give all that up? Who was I to be greedy and want more? Right? This was a
Mm.
really big story in my mind of be happy with what you have, don't ask for too much. And again, who are you to want more? Right?
Mm.
And so, in this period of my life, during all these conversations, I had come across this folder of ideas that, no kidding, had ideas back 20 years, like 2 decades of my soul screaming at me for business ideas and product lines. And it was like,
Mm.
you wanted to start your own business since you were 30, right? Like, just go do it. And I was 48 at this point. And I laid it all out on my table and it covered my entire dining room table. And it was, it looked like a crazy woman's environment. It was post-it notes and things written on the backs of menus and legal pads and like I ripped up, torn off napkins with random ideas just all shoved in this folder. And it made me cry. I thought, oh my God, my soul has been craving something different than what I'm doing in this
Mm.
life. And I've been
Mm.
ignoring it because it's uncomfortable, because I don't know
Mm.
how to do it, right? Because I don't have the money to start a business. I don't have whatever, right? So at the same time, I was in a job that I hated. I had started about 4 months earlier. It was in a really small company. It wasn't what it was promised to be. And I was pretty miserable. And as it turned out, I knew I was going to need to look for something else. And then I got really clear. It was really obvious this company was insolvent and he was not going to be able to keep paying me. And I
Mm.
thought, okay, this was like, I don't know, November-ish. And I thought if he could just hang on till January, like, could I put my house on the market and sell it and just let me be employed until January and then I have the profits from the house. It did not last till January. I got laid off in December and I knew that I didn't want to go find another job. Just the sheer thought of it made me so miserable I couldn't even function. And so all of this stuff swirling together, I thought, screw it. I'm pressing the reset button. I am not finding a job. I am not going back to corporate space. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know it includes a business. Don't know how I'm going to make any money. And I don't know. I knew it included a business, regaining my health, and writing a book. And that's which I'd always wanted to do for my entire life. And so I did it. And I
Mm.
put my house, I found a realtor that week in December. I spent all of January getting ready for it, like, the repairs and whatnot. And I put the house on the market on February 28th. And I used this work that we're talking about. I had a vision for the end result. I knew exactly the kind of people I wanted to sell it to. I wanted the sales experience to be a certain way. I wanted in a certain time frame. I held that vision. I did my work. I noticed the obvious actions that came out of it. That house sold the morning we put it on the market, and like literally it couldn't have happened faster. And so what it did was I created, it's always hard for me to take the credit for it, right? Like I say, it happened. No, I made it happen,
Mm.
right? And this work, to your point, the agency, I created an environment in which I had no responsibilities financially, no physical space responsibilities like managing a home, no job responsibilities, nothing. I had nothing but white space in front of me to consider what I wanted for my life. And that's how I started my journey. And it wasn't, I don't even remember the question you just asked me. I don't remember where we were
Just
going.
tell us about Flittersphere.
So I started this journey, and Flittersphere was born of that. I knew
Mm.
what the only thing I knew, and this is really interesting. Let's talk about the timing of our creations, right? So
Mm.
the only thing I knew was I have this concept that I call sparkable moments. If you've ever had a conversation with someone, a stranger, a friend you haven't seen in 10 years, your spouse, whatever, that just everything lights up. Like you are on fire, your eyes are dilating, you couldn't be more connected, your heart is pounding, your mind is like oh my God, you get this great insight and clarity and you are absolutely in the zone, right? You're full of joy. It's almost feels like you're experimenting, like there's just an energy about it. And I love those moments, and all I
Mm.
knew was I wanted to create more of them. And I didn't know, and all I could think was, oh, well, how do you, it's like having coffee with your best friend, right? Like how do you get people to pay you for that, and how do you make a living at that? And I had no idea. And so I went off on this whole other thing. I ended up coaching. I'm still doing consulting in the learning and development space and all that stuff. And just recently, and in no small part to you, starting your own podcast, it was really clear to me that I was ready to do this. And the podcast is going to be called Sparkable Moments. And it was like
Mm,
this thing that and I'm not at all focused on how I'm going to make money on it. I don't even care. It's like a passion project for me, right?
mm,
So I went from this space 4 or 5 years ago of, I don't know how I'm going to do it or what I'm going to do. I just know I need a shift and I need the space to do it. And so I created the space. And then I had an idea. And that idea just sort of sat with me and it iterated into other ideas that I executed on, but it never really evolved because I didn't put any focus on it. But I never let it go. It was always sort of right there, an undercurrent, right? And when the time was right, when I was ready for it, when my spirit was ready, it just bubbled up to the top and said, "Hey, remember me? Sparkable moments,
mm.
conversations, like coffee chats. Shit, start a podcast." And it's so obvious.
Became obvious. Yeah,
Yes, and that's when you
absolutely.
take action. And so it's
Mm.
that's the whole thing. The Flittersphere has evolved completely like that all the way.
Mm.
And so,
And the other part of the question about Flittersphere was why
sorry.
women in
Oh, I'm
midlife.
sorry.
No, no, no. This was great. This is a great story.
This is my mind, right? So why women is because I knew I had gone through that and I knew I was not alone. It's really
Mm,
common in midlife, especially for people, not just women, but for people in general to want to shift something. They, worked in IT for 20 years and found it, they had that career accidentally and they've always wanted to open a pizzeria. So they put in 20 years, they've got a good 401k, I'm shifting my life, right? It's a really common thing. And I knew that I wasn't alone in this and I wanted to help other people do it. But I felt like I could connect better to other women. If we're being really frank, I feel like in my whole life I've never understood men. Like I'm sure it has a lot to do with me being single. And so I felt like I just wanted to help other women who were in this space. I understand what it is to be a woman trying to meet other people's expectations, suffocating my own desires, and having my own experience to share of this, right? How I came out of that space. And so it just felt natural. I don't know that it's always going to be that way. I have a vision in my head right now for a community, like an online membership community that
mm.
does not see, the vision does not say it's just women, which is really surprising to me because it's always just said focus on helping women, right? Because it's who I am, it's what I know. So I think it could evolve over time, but it just seemed like the right place to start.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more about you or connect with you, where can they go?
Oh, thank you. You can go to flittersphere.com. So I'll spell it because it's a made up word. So it's FLITTERSPHERE, flittersphere.com.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
I'll put that in the description
Thank
as
you.
well. Yeah. So, my final question for you, Suzette, thank you for sharing your story and the evolution of Flittersphere. And of course, I would love to have you back over time and hear more about what's going on and just chat in general. I always love to chat about ideas with you. But one of the things I ask all my guests is I have a daughter, as you know,
Mhm.
and she is about to be 3 next week. She'll be 3 years old. I know, it's amazing. It's gone by so quickly. So, when you reflect back on your life, all the things that you've learned, everything you've experienced, what would you say to your 3-year-old self, knowing what you know now? What would you say to your
Mhm.
3-year-old self?
What a great question. What would I say to my 3-year-old self? There's so much I would want to teach her, right? Like this
Mm,
little girl inside of me, so much that I wish I'd known back then. Um, I think I'm going to sum it up like this. So it's two parts. The key to your happiness, sweet little girl, is being willing to disappoint other people.
mm,
Like just own the
mm,
truth of who you are and what you want and don't worry so much about others. You will disappoint them when you do that. And that's okay, right? It's not like don't be angry towards them. It's not that kind of energy. It's be willing to disappoint other people and just keep moving on your own path. Um, and then I would say, and stay connected to your spirit. This part of you, that age that before you hit like 5 or 6 years old, right? you don't know yet to care what other people think. You don't know how to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You don't consider that polka dots and stripes are not acceptable together, right? Like you do what you want to do. Your spirit is so pure. It's that state of innocence. And it's about 6 or 7 or 8 years old when that stuff starts to fade and other influences come out and they go to school and all this stuff. And what I have discovered during this journey is the more I can stay connected to that inner 3 year old, to the truth of who she is, to her energy, her passions, right? This playfulness, this boldness, whatever you describe as your true nature, the more you can talk to that part of you and stay connected to you, the easier life is, the more charmed life is by intention, right? Like you can intentionally create a charmed life by staying connected to the truth of who you are when you were 3, 4, 5 years old. So I would tell her that stay connected
Mm,
and be okay disappointing people.
mm. That's beautiful. Thank you for being here, Suzette.
Thank you, Tracy. I love our conversations always.
Oh, likewise,
Yeah.
likewise. And if you'd like to learn more about me, you can visit tracyloring.com. That's where you connect with me as well. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd love for you to leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments below if there's anyone that you think might be a great fit for this podcast. Thank you. Thanks for listening.